Right. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney and former Morris County, New Jersey prosecutor Robert A. Bianchi. Thank you very much for joining us. A couple things surprised you about this news conference, and you would know, having been experienced in this sort of field. Number one, we were assured that it seems as if they've got the two suspects, which sort of claims that apparently there's no more, or that, they're alluding to that. But we know that that cannot possibly be proven at this point.
Yeah, it was surprising to me, Julie, as a person that was the head of an agency that dealt with Homeland Security and did a number of these investigations myself. It is way, way too early, in my opinion, especially before they get to the electronic data, the computers, get through that house, see whether there's connections to other individuals, because just by the fact that they are the shooters and potentially the only shooters doesn't mean that there isn't a conspiracy with one or other people that helped organize this crime. So I'm really surprised that they came out. I think that this is a problem. As a prosecutor myself, I don't tell the community that they're not in danger until I have absolute concrete evidence that there is no danger to the community. And more importantly, now that we have the names of these individuals, I want information and data from the community. So I was surprised they came out ahead of it so quickly like that.
Well, there are, of course, multiple different investigations going on, and obviously they have to search this home, and in that home you are going to be finding computers, and there's going to be a lot of data that they still need to investigate. How clear do you think they are in being able to come out and say that this situation has been contained? And is this about the first time that you've ever heard of a husband, possible wife scenario? Because this, from my recent memory, is the first that I've heard of such a thing, where it's not a larger network, that this was a pre-planned thing between a man and a woman. And I want to accentuate woman here, because she was in fact hooded and part of the alleged shooting. She and him apparently have a 6-month-old baby. This isn't necessarily your typical type of potential terror.
Yeah, I've prosecuted cases with combinations of men and women that have been involved in homicide cases. It isn't typical, and I think that some of the commentary that's been made earlier may be true. It could be a combination of incidents that are going on here. They may be radicalized to a certain extent. Maybe. We just don't know. It may be that this was the triggering event, some issue that happened at his work, but he had an otherwise stable life. Now, one other thing that chief said that was really surprising to me is that when we're on these scenes, it's data management is key, and one of the first things you're doing is finding out whether there were any issues on his job, whether there was a situation that occurred, and whether this was a momentary thing. But let's be honest, these people obviously were planned, because even if it was momentary, they had the weapons, they had the protective gear, they had explosive devices. So it's clear that something was in the background, and I almost wonder whether or not they were kind of laying in wait to see if something was going to happen at work, and when it didn't happen, then they decided to go into action. It's hard to say at this point in time. Anything that we're dealing right now without the computers, the GPS, the phone records is mere speculation.
Bob, a quick question. What makes authorities, what's the trigger point when they have to know whether indeed if it was radical terrorism or workplace violence? Do they have to find radical information on his computers? Do they have to find connection or anything, whether it's a connection to ISIS or even finding material that is sympathetic to a radical jihad? Is that enough to make this a terrorist case, or not at all? That they would say, look, he was angry, they came back, planned something, went back and hit the room based on some workplace issue?
Yeah, well, they're going to definitely want to have some sort of connection, some nexus to some sort of terrorist-related activity. It could be literature. The computers are going to tell us a lot here. They're going to see whether or not there's connections to anybody who's radicalized. Listen, just because he's of that faith doesn't obviously mean that he's a person that is going out there and doing a jihad. But listen, law enforcement is going to want to slow media down. I was in this position. We want to get confirmed, detailed facts. We want to double check them. We want to make sure they're absolutely correct before we go out and we say that this is the motive for a particular case. Because trust me, in the beginning of an investigation, I believe somebody already said this, and it's very true, it looks like one thing, and then when you get all the other data, it becomes something completely different. So they need to be very, I did this, you have to be very, very tight with the information that you're giving out. In fact, he gave out far more information, in my opinion, right now than probably is going to be wise at this stage.
Now we do know that the Joint Terrorism Task Force is involved, and that is a significant development, because earlier they were saying that they do not have any reason to believe that it was terror, that they could not prove it's terror. The Joint Terrorism Task Force gets involved, and that changes everything. What are they looking for? And in particular, what are they looking for in their home? And I should also mention the ammunition that these two had on them, because this clearly proves that this was premeditated with the vests and the tactical equipment that they had, the long guns and the firearms. And in fact, when they were being pursued by police and there was that high-speed chase before the couple crashed their SUV, they in fact had thrown something out of the car that turned out to be a fake bomb. If they were so prepared, wouldn't they have live explosives in their car? It just makes you wonder how amateur-ish they were, or if they did have a larger network behind them.
Yeah, no, it's impossible to say right now, but getting to the first point, when the JTTF is involved in this case, obviously it only is prudent for the FBI and the JTTF and all the other federal assets working with local law enforcement to make sure that they do the worst case scenario, which would be the terrorism piece, because we don't know. Listen, we've been talking about this as prosecutors for many, many years right after September 11th. These soft targets are a big concern for us. So they really need to drill down to find out whether or not there's other cells, if there are, or there are other individuals. And the JTTF and the federal assets are going to do that. They have sophistication. I'm not going to speak about it, but they have the sophisticated ability with the Marshal Service and other services to do some amazing electronic data. All cases today of this nature come down to the electronic footprint that's out there. So we're going to have to wait until that's analyzed.
Something alarming that we all learned after the Paris terror attacks here in the United States is the FBI's inside concerns about our ability to track down radical jihadists here in our country. They did reveal that there are some 50 different investigations of possible ISIS sympathizers in this country, where they have some dozen special forces that are assigned to each and every individual one. And those are only 50 that they know of. But the FBI, in fact, has said it is impossible, and they are very concerned that they'll be able to get a handle on this. And these soft targets are out there and in the open, and it almost seems they're impossible to protect. Are they impossible to protect?
Well, listen, that's a great question, and that's a question that we've been concerned about for many years, the soft targets, because that's really where the real terrorism comes in. And there's so many different scenarios that we in law enforcement were looking into in order to target harden. But the most important thing that we can do, I think, is illustrated by this case. If the data we're receiving is accurate and the neighbors saw all this kind of strange activity going on, we've kind of become a little laxed after September 11th. We need people to be vigilant. We need them to call in. They need to be our eyes and ears. Law enforcement cannot be out there tracking every single person down. So the citizens are a very, very important component to give data and intelligence.
Robert A. Bianchi, thank you very, very much. And of course, we have much more coverage for you.
Our live coverage continuing here in the Fox News Channel.